Good morning, everybody. Got a little bit of an early edition of the NBA breakdown today. Full day of work, so we got the research done. Might as well get it out there. Full disclosure, this has been not the best week betting wise, especially a couple days ago. Just had a large volume and a number of things didn't bounce my way. But if you want to get straight to the game, skip ahead like a minute because I'm just going to talk. Well, you can't skip ahead if you're watching it live. If you're on the replay, skip ahead a minute. But just considering like that betting strategy, I tweeted after that day that I had overextended and taken a hit. But the reality is, talked to a couple guys and they were good spots. Like I'd make 95% of those bets again in the same situation. So, and it doesn't mean I'm right about 95% of them. It just means based on my process and everything I look at, which has been working and has been positive now. It probably won't be positive this week unless I have a few big days, but 3 straight weeks, really positive. Can't abandon the process just because you have a couple bounces go bad, or not a couple bounces, but you have a bad day. It happens. Even a really bad day sometimes. So I don't think the reads were all bad. It just, a lot of games didn't finish the way I needed them to finish. So that said, we are at the end of the NBA season here, and I do think things are even trickier than they normally are. So do need to have some restraint and some discipline. But if we find good spots, I'm probably going to keep hitting them because in the long run, I believe it's going to work out. So hopefully there's some stuff you can take away from today, even if it's stuff where you see things differently and you want to fade what I'm saying. That's cool. Again, the whole point of me doing this is just to get some info out there that my goal is to be helpful to you as I'm doing this process for myself. So, all right, that said, let's jump into this rather large slate today for the NBA. This is the NBA breakdown for Friday, April 1st. First up, we have the Mavs at the Wizards, and Dallas is -8.5 with a 220 total. Dallas has been playing a little bit higher scoring games than you'd think about half the time. I mean, I think it just got so ingrained in my head with Dallas that they were such a great defensive team and pretty limited offensively that I assume that all their games are going to be in that, 100 to 105 type games. And they have had some lower scoring games in their last 10. There's a 201 total in there, a 211, 212. But I mean, their last two have been 232, 238. There's a 237, a 224 in there. So they're both scoring and allowing more than I naturally think they do. And I think that's just a good check on how we think about Dallas. Maybe you're not in that same mental space as I am, but this is the reason I like to dive into the numbers is sometimes my perception of things isn't quite fitting with reality. And I need to be able to check myself on that. More along these lines, Dallas has a defensive rating of 116.3 on the road in their last 14 games. They have played some pretty good offenses in there. So they played Minnesota, Charlotte, Philadelphia, who knows? Man, they look so shitty against the Pistons yesterday. So maybe they're good offense, maybe they're not. But Brooklyn, Boston, back when Boston was killing it offensively. So I'm not throwing that number out there to say that Dallas is a bad defensive team by any stretch of the imagination. It's just to say that they're not necessarily crushing it defensively. On the Washington side, they've scored quite a bit at home lately. So they did have a game where they only scored 94, but their other 4 in their last 5 at home, 127, 123, 127, 109. Not against great defenses, but just to say that they've been pretty solid offensively here recently. They do give up 115 or more most of the time. They're pretty consistent in that. In terms of home and away, it is also a spot where Washington has been better at home over their last 14, especially offensively. Their offensive rating is 12 points better at home than on the road over their last 14, 119.6. So the other thing we got to talk about in all these games is what teams have to play for. And I do think that this can be overblown. I remember this at the end of the baseball season where you would talk about what teams had to play for. And then half the time or more, it seemed like it didn't really end up mattering. So I think there is a difference between a team that doesn't have anything to play for and a team that is hardcore tanking and willing to sit whoever they have to and all that kind of stuff. Washington doesn't seem to be in that boat right now. Except for Kuzma, they continue to play their starters. reasonably good minutes. They continue to have somewhat competitive games. And so it doesn't seem like a team like Orlando that's in full on tank mode and will do anything they have to lose. That said, and let's look at Dallas real quick as well. So in the Western Conference, they are tied for number 3 right now with the Warriors. So there continues to be motivation for Dallas to win these games, secure that number 3 seed. I think that's, definitely reasonably helpful. Stay away from the Suns. So I would think they want to come out and continue to win, but I'm not convinced that this game for sure is a blowout. I lined at Dallas 115, Washington 110. So at 8.5, I mean, this isn't a game where I'm likely to bet Washington plus the 8.5, just again, because I don't feel confident they're going to come out and play well or even play their starters, their full complement of minutes. Maybe they do, but just not confident. And then on the total, I would lean toward the over here, especially in this spot. Again, Dallas's defensive rating on the road hasn't been good, and Washington's offensive rating at home has been very good. So I think the over is a decent look here. You might even consider the Wizards team total over because it's going to be a little bit lower. Let me actually, if I can pull this up quick here, we'll check what the Wizards team total is today. It is 104.5 at minus 105 on WinBet. I don't think that's a bad look at all. I think there's a very solid chance of them scoring 105 points against Dallas today, given the way that they've been scoring at home in particular. So not a game that I have tons of interest in, but after talking through all that, I think the Wizards team total over that 104.5 would be my best look in that game, if anything. Next up, we have the team that I was talking about that's hardcore tanking, the Magic. They are welcoming in the Raptors, and Toronto is minus 10 with a 218.5 total. Toronto has been really good lately. Unfortunately, in that last game against the Timberwolves, the first half was really close and competitive, and I actually was hopeful that Minnesota was going to put in a good effort and even pull out that game to try to keep contact with Denver and Utah for the division, but they got destroyed. Toronto just came out and curb stomped them in the second half. And I still think Minnesota's a relatively decent team. So Toronto is on one of these runs right now where they are playing really well. In their last 12 games, 7 of the last 12, they've been at 115 or more. They've had 3 where they were under 105. So the offense, it's been definitely more good than bad. The defense has been really good overall, especially against bad teams, but they gave up 102 to Minnesota a couple days ago. They gave up 106 to Boston in regulation. Now, obviously, that's Tatum and Brown out. That was when first game with Williams hurt. So I don't know how much we can read into that Boston one, but just to say their defense has been really solid, and they're going against a bad offensive team tonight. So if we want to talk about how they do against bad offenses, this is a game where we can definitely talk about that. They've held teams under 105 in 7 out of their last 12 and only allowed 115 or more in 2 out of the last 12. I think this is a spot because Orlando is tanking hard, because Toronto really needs to keep winning, would want to keep winning. They're in the 6th seed right now, and I think they have that pretty much locked down. They're 2.5 games ahead of the Cavs, and the Cavs are atrocious at the moment. But they're only half a game back of the Bulls for the 5 seed, and they're 2 games back of Philly for the 4 seed. So it's unlikely that they get up all the way up to number 4, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So, and if I'm Toronto, I also want to keep the momentum rolling here. This is a team that I do feel like rides the momentum in either direction at times. And so they've got it moving in a really positive direction. I think they'd want to keep that going. Orlando on the other side, I've already said, hardcore tanking as much as anybody in the league. They lost by 17 to Washington, 16 to Oklahoma City, 14 to Detroit, 42 to Brooklyn. They did take Philly to overtime, and they beat Golden State. This is all within like the last 10 games. But we've seen that Philly is bad. I mean, Philly just lost to Detroit, so I don't know how much that means. And Golden State has been bad as well. So Orlando's not a team to be feared in any way. They've only scored 110 or more in 3 out of their last 12. I don't think that's likely to happen against a team like Toronto. This to me has the look of a beatdown. Again, I feel like we have to be careful here at the end of the season. But Orlando's team total is 103. I don't hate under 103. I haven't bet that. I did bet Toronto. I think I bet Toronto minus 9.5. I'd have to go double check. It's up to minus 10 now. I still don't think that's terrible. I line this 115.98 Toronto. If Toronto keeps their foot on the gas here, I think they could win by 20. It's just a matter of if they keep their foot on the gas. But yeah, I mean, all the numbers and the situation to me say this is a Toronto blowout and that Orlando struggles to even get to 100 points in this game. Next up, we have the Pacers at the Celtics. Boston all the way up to minus 15 here, 224.5 total. These two teams played on February 27th, and Indiana actually won 128-107, which is pretty crazy because that was a point at which Boston was playing phenomenally and was all the way healthy. Obviously, now with Robert Williams out, that is affecting Boston. I think they lost their last two games in a row. They lost to Miami and really couldn't muster anything on offense. That was the most surprising thing to me in that game. That was one of those from a couple days ago where I didn't fare well. I did have Boston winning. That read was not even close, but I also had the over in that game. It was only like 211.5 or something. And Boston, or maybe it was 213, whatever. Boston just couldn't score. That was surprising to see because I expected them to struggle defensively more than offensively with Williams out. So looking at this game, Indiana's done. They did only lose to Denver by 7. Another game that I lost where I had Denver minus 9, I think, or something like that. We're going to go through lots of losses that I had talking about these teams from a couple days ago. But I mean, Denver blew Indiana out in the first half, and then Indiana actually beat them in the second half, which more is an indictment of, Denver showed these tendencies to not close games well, and that kind of is what happened there. But Indiana's given up 125 or more in 4 straight to Denver, Atlanta, Toronto, and Memphis. 4 good offensive teams, but I still do think Boston's a good offensive team as well. They've given up 125 or more in 8 out of their last 12. They have scored 115 or more in 8 out of their last 12. So Indiana their offense has been okay. Their defense has been bad. The Celtics have scored 124 or more in 5 straight before their last 2 games. So they sat out everybody against Toronto, and then they really laid an egg against Miami. And also we have to see what they're going to look like going forward without Williams. But their defense has still been pretty good the last 2 games. They gave up 106 in each of those last 2 without Williams. And Indiana, I just don't think they have enough size or skill in the front court to hurt Boston a lot with having Williams out. I don't think it's going to be a big deal in this game. I think this is a game where Boston should roll. I mean, I feel a little tentative just because of the last couple games with Boston. But from everything I can see of where these teams are truly at, Indiana is definitely not good. And I think Boston is still a good team. I would have probably put them first in the East, maybe, competing with Milwaukee before Williams went down. Even with him out, I still think they're better than the 76ers. I still actually think they're better than the Heat. Like, those two teams play a series, and I've got Boston in that series. So this is another game sort of like Toronto, where I would say if the Celtics keep their foot on the gas, it's a blowout. But 15 points is so many. I line this 125-105 Boston, and this is going to just be a stay away for me. 15 points is too much. If the Pacers keep it close for a little while, I may come in live on Boston if we can get that number down under 10. But at the current line, I'm just not interested. Next up, Pistons at the Thunder. Detroit, back-to-back, coming off that big win against Philly. They're 7-5 against the spread on a back-to-back, and they come into this game -5 against the Thunder. The total's 221.5. The hard thing here is both of these teams kind of need to lose. Detroit's 1 game up on being last in the league, and Oklahoma City's 2 games up. So in terms of improving their draft status, Both of these teams need to lose. Now, that doesn't mean that the players on the floor, we've talked about this before, it doesn't mean they're going to try to lose. It just means that the organizations probably don't want them winning this game. Detroit's been a team that is really up or really down when it comes to offense. They've either scored around 100 or over 115. I mean, in their last 10, 102, 123, 102, 97, 122, 115, 134, 98. So they've just kind of been all or nothing here recently. And it's kind of been the same on defense. They've played high-scoring games, low-scoring games. Makes them a little bit hard to cap. They have, in their last 14, been a little bit higher scoring on the road, which is where they're at here. 114.8 offensive rating compared to 110.2 at home. But then also a 116.9 defensive rating on the road, 108.4 at home. This is going to, my favorite play here is going to be on the total. And this is one of the things that plays into it for me, is that they're scoring more and giving up more on the road. So on their side, that leans toward an over in this situation. Oklahoma City, on the other side, they have been scoring well, but giving up a ton of points lately. So for scoring, 118, 115, 107, 118. They do have an 85 in their last 10, but other than that, they've been at 107 or better and up 115 to 120 about half the time. So they've been scoring the ball well. Their defense has not been so good. So in their last 10 on defense, they have a 90 and a 102. Okay, those are pretty good. Other than that, we're 113 plus, and we've got 4 of the 10 games at 122 or worse. So they are hemorrhaging points defensively. In their last 14, they are scoring and giving up more points at home. So their offensive rating is 112.2 at home, 107.9 on the road. But this is the big number. Their defensive rating at home in the last 14, 125.9. That's really, really bad. On the road, it's 115.9, which is still not good, but it's a 10-point swing. So 15-point swing better for an over at home for Oklahoma City. And if we go back to Detroit, it's a 12-point swing toward an over away from home. This is just in the last 14 games. But that's enough for me to say with a total like this at 221.5, the over, I think, is a good look here. I have a Detroit 123, Oklahoma City 114. Man, I might end up being big wrong on this one, but that's a 237 for me. I mean, I haven't had that big of a difference between the set total and where I think the game is going in quite a while. And I know that Oklahoma City has nobody playing. I mean, they're sitting everybody now. Let me pull up the injury report here. So Trey Mann's going to be out. Williams is out. They've got Maladon, Wiggins, Pokusevski, Roby. But Waters can come in and drain some threes. I just think if this is a game that doesn't end up having a lot of defense, even though it's two not great teams, yeah, I think the over is a good look here. In terms of the spread, I would stay away. I would lean Thunder with the points, actually. I think it's possible Detroit even sits some people here on a back-to-back where they kind of want to lose. But I'm not going to do anything with that spread. Next up is the Clippers at the Bucks, Milwaukee minus 8.5 and a 229 total. This is an interesting game. So both of these teams are on a back-to-back. The Clippers are 5-7 against the spread on a back-to-back. Milwaukee 4-8. But the big thing here, obviously, is that Paul George is back and he hasn't been playing for a long time. The thing that we're going to have to watch out here for, though, is Paul George going to play on a back-to-back? Are the Clippers going to play all their people on a back-to-back? This is a place where the Clippers just don't really need to keep winning. If we look at where they're at in the West right now, they're in the 8th spot, and they are 3.5 games up on the Pelicans for 8th, and then they're 6 games behind the Timberwolves for 7th. They don't have anything to gain by winning or losing here, really. Milwaukee, on the other hand, they do have something to gain by continuing to win. They're half a game back of the Heat for the number 1 seed in the East. So I think we got to watch. I think it's possible the Clippers sit people here. The last 2 games, the Clippers have scored 118 and 121 with Paul George. So he makes a big difference. There's no doubt, right? They have allowed 115 or more in 5 straight, and that's bad news going up against a Milwaukee team that has a really strong offense. Now, their scoring hasn't been quite as good as I thought it would be before I looked. They're around 115 a lot, but this is a team that has 130-point upside if you're not going to bring a strong defensive effort. And especially their scoring at home has been good. This is another spot where home could matter. Only 114 in their last one, but before that, 126, 124, 132, 120, 130. So again, they have that 130-point upside, especially at home. Their defense hasn't been awesome, Milwaukee's lately, but they've played some good offenses, and they have had a few games where they've held teams down under 110. The most they've given up is 127, which isn't great. They do have, 138, I'm sorry. They have 4 games that are pretty bad defensively, but I don't think the Clippers are a team that's going to run it up on Milwaukee, to be honest. So, also last 14, Milwaukee's offensive rating, 123.2 at home, so really good. 115.9 on the road, and Milwaukee's defensive rating 110.3 at home, 116.4 on the road. So we're talking about a 14-point swing better at home than on the road for Milwaukee. I think this is a great spot for Milwaukee. Another team, I mean, I've said this numerous times, but this is another one where I think if they come out and they keep their foot on the gas, especially if the Clippers sit a few people, they should get a blowout here. I think if Paul George sits, that minus 8.5 is going to end up looking like a huge gift. I think even with Paul George in, I have this as 122, 109 Clippers, and that was me assuming Paul George is going to play. I think if he doesn't, that probably moves up to more like 127, 109 or something like that. So if you think the Clippers are going to sit anybody, I think I already bet the minus 8.5. I like it okay, even if the Clippers play everyone. And again, if they sit people, I love it even more. Total, I'd stay away from. Pretty close to where I have it lined. Next up is the disappointment of the day. Suns at the Grizzlies. Phoenix minus 8, 229 total. I mean, this game was going to be awesome. Number 1 and 2 in the West. Maybe a Western Conference Finals preview. And then the freaking Grizzlies just decided to sit everybody. Man, I just feel so disappointed in Memphis for doing that here. I don't understand why you picked this game to rest everyone when, I just wish they would test themselves here, but they're not. Adams, Bane, Jackson, Tyus Jones, all doubtful. John Morant already out. It does look like Phoenix is going to play people here. There's no signs that they're not going to, and Cam Johnson is supposed to be back today. JaVale McGee should be available again. Phoenix is going for their regular season record of wins as a franchise. I wondered if they would want to wait and try to get that record at home, but they play Oklahoma City away in their next game, so they're probably getting that record while they're on the road regardless, and maybe they want to run it up a little bit, try to put that record out of reach for the future. Sorry, I had to find my notes there. With everybody sitting, I just don't know that there's much to say here. Phoenix should roll. I mean, Phoenix has been playing really phenomenal. The Grizzlies have been too, especially without Morant. I talk about that all the time, even though they also let me down 2 days ago and only ended up winning by 1 when they were up on the Spurs by 7 going into the fourth quarter. But I still would like Memphis. I mean, when I first saw this line, I thought, dang, Memphis +8 against Phoenix. I like that. I do think Phoenix is a better team, and so I expected to see that line at maybe 4.5 or something. And so 8, I was surprised. But with everybody sitting out like this, I think this should be pretty much a smash spot for Phoenix. They should be able to do just about whatever they want, and I think Memphis could struggle offensively because they're going to be relying on Dylan Brooks, DeAnthony Melton, Brandon Clark. I mean, I don't know who else they're going to rely on offensively, and so those guys might even be interesting for player props just because of the usage they're going to get. But I don't think they're going to be able to hang with Phoenix here if Phoenix wants to go and destroy them. So I think this is Phoenix by 10+. I have not bet the spread here yet. Maybe I will. I don't know. There's just something in me holding me back, but not a lot worth breaking down in terms of the numbers when we have this many people sitting. Next up is another game we can scoot through pretty quick. Kings at the Rockets. Sacramento is -2, 231.5 total. We just saw this game 2 days ago. It was 121, 118 Sacramento in the last one. I see no reason to think that it's going to be significantly different. which means a close game with a total around 230 to 235, which means this is lined where I'd expect it to be, and I don't see any edges to be had in this game. So we're going to move on to the Blazers at the Spurs. San Antonio minus 15.5, 231.5 total. These teams played on pretty recently, March 23rd, and San Antonio won 133-96 in Portland. Just absolute destruction. So they won by 37 points. So maybe this line's a steal. It's less than half of how the last game turned out. At this point, we know the deal with Portland, giving up 115 or more in every game since the All-Star break. They're going to give up a ton of points. The problem is that they're very up and down scoring. They will score 98, and then they'll score 121. And so it's hard to know against a team that isn't that great defensively, like the Spurs, if Portland comes out and actually is able to put up some points. Because if they do come out and put up 115, then that 15.5-point spread starts to look pretty daunting. The Spurs, I don't believe, are a great team, but they are in the 10th spot in the West right now and need to keep winning. I mean, I think this is a win for them. I'd be shocked if Portland actually won, but I would not be shocked if Portland kept it within 15.5. Partly also, the Spurs are actually worse at home in their last 14. Their offensive rating is 10 points worse, 109.3 to 119.7. Their defensive rating is 6 points worse at home. So in the last 14, 16 points combined between offensive, defensive rating worse at home doesn't instill a bunch of confidence out in me to go out there and lay 15.5 points. So this game's a stay away for me. Nothing I like there. Timberwolves at the Nuggets. This probably is the game of the night because they should be playing people and they both still have something to play for. Minnesota at this point would have to win every game to have any chance of overtaking Utah or Denver in the standings. And even then, it's extremely unlikely. I think they're 3 games back of both of those teams with 5 or 6 to play, depending on the team. But, I mean, yeah, they got to go out and win every game. Denver, on the other hand, tied with Utah right now for the division, and that's really all they have to play for because they could end up with the 5 or the 6 seed, but they're not likely to get up to number 4. I mean, they are only 2 games behind the Warriors, so I don't think it's impossible for sure. The Warriors have been bad, but it's unlikely, and they're probably not falling down to 7. Minnesota's not, very, very slim chance of Minnesota catching either of them. So I do expect both these teams to come out and give it their best shot tonight, though. Minnesota has Denver, Houston, Washington, San Antonio, and Chicago left. So after tonight, they have 4 very winnable games. Minnesota scored 116 or less in 5 straight now. It has been against good defenses. They've had a really tough schedule, but the scoring definitely hasn't been where it was before. I would not say that Denver is a great defense. So I think this is a good spot for them to hopefully get right offensively, at least. Minnesota allowed 125 or more in 3 of those 5 games where they scored 116 or less. So their defense hasn't been good at the same time that their offense hasn't been great either. We might be seeing, there would be no shock if I overvalue Minnesota because I really like them. And I do like their roster and their talent, but maybe these last 5 games we're seeing that when they go up against the best teams in the league, they're going to really struggle on both ends. Denver scored 127 or more in 3 of their last 5. 2 of those were against Phoenix and the Clippers. So that's scoring a lot of points against decent defensive teams. They did allow 115 or more in 3 of those games. In the last 14, Denver's offensive rating at home has been 121.1, so really phenomenal. Their defensive rating, though, has been 123.4. So this is, again, where I say I think this could be a get-right spot for Minnesota offensively. I'm not sure that it is defensively. I think Denver could still put up plenty of points on them. Interesting matchup here between Jokic and Towns. Theoretically, this is a good matchup for both of them. Looking at dganalytics.com, shout out to DGen Eli. Denver, since February 3rd, Denver allows the 2nd most points, 5th most rebounds, 2nd most assists to centers over expectation. And Minnesota allows 4th most points, 9th most rebounds, and 4th most assists to centers. So if you like player props, I think Towns and Jokic are 2 people to look at here tonight. Again, go find somebody who knows more about it than I do, though, before you pull any triggers on that. I line this game 121-125 Denver. So I think it is a high scoring game. I think both these teams put up a lot of points. I did bet the over 237 is very high, but I think both these teams can just give up a lot of points. I actually think Minnesota has a chance here. Denver hasn't been closing games well, and throughout the season, they've gone up and down, but often their fourth quarters just haven't been very strong. So if Minnesota can keep it reasonably close, I actually do think they have a chance to pull this one out. But I did lean a little bit toward Denver. I wouldn't bet the spread here, all that to say. I think this is probably, I'd lean a little toward Denver, close to a coin flip. So I'm just going to stay away from that spread. Next up, last game of the day, we have the Pelicans at the Lakers. The Pelicans, this is an interesting one. So the Pelicans were +2. When I first looked this morning, I actually didn't even look last night. And now they are -1.5 with a 232.5 total. So this line has flipped. And I don't think we have news that LeBron is for sure sitting out yet. He showed up as a game time decision or even leaning toward doubtful in what I saw, but it looks like Anthony Davis will play. That's the reason this line was so close to begin with, or the Pelicans were favored. I think there is a little bit of overvaluing the Lakers if Davis and LeBron play, and that's probably why the line started where it was. Even if those guys play, here's what we're dealing with. Anthony Davis, who hasn't played in, I'd have to look 20 however many games. Maybe I'm off on that. I didn't go look. Somebody fact check me and just tell me what an idiot I am. That's fine. But he hasn't played in a long time. LeBron has been out for the last few games and I think is legitimately injured. If you look at how badly he turned that ankle over, I know he gets good treatment and they can do stuff for him, but that was a pretty significant ankle turn. So it's hard for me to imagine that he's 100%. So now we get an Anthony Davis coming off of a long layoff, probably on a minutes restriction. Hasn't been phenomenal this year anyway, with LeBron James probably not at 100%. They haven't played together forever. The team has to figure out how to play again against a Pelicans team that is getting everyone healthy and I think has a really strong starting five when they do have everyone healthy. In addition, you got the Brandon Ingram revenge game narrative here. So I think this is actually a way better spot for the Pelicans than it is for the Lakers. Now, the Pelicans have been a little worse on the road on offense in their last 14, but some of that was without Ingram. And their offensive rating was still 114.3. So it's decent, not great, but not terrible. Defensive rating 111.1 on the road in their last 14, so pretty good. If you look at the Lakers with and without Davis and LeBron, it's actually interesting. The Lakers have a 6-point better offensive rating without Anthony Davis. Their defensive rating is 8 points worse. So he's mattered on defense a lot more than offense. With LeBron, they're better on offense and defense. Or no, offense with him in, defense with him out. So I don't know. It's hard for me to get too pumped about Davis and LeBron. Maybe if they were both really healthy and we were like 5 games into them coming back, I'd be more excited. But I'm not. I just don't trust the Lakers, period, here. And I think in terms of public betting, if there is news that those two guys are coming back, I see that like bringing in a lot of public action on the Lakers, most likely. And yeah, I just think they're overvalued. And those guys playing is overvalued. So I line this as a win for the Pelicans by 6, 114-108. And that's assuming both of those guys play, because I think that they are a slower team and a better defensive team if both of those guys are in. If they don't play, I think it could be even wider. So I got in on the Pelicans money line at +107. I definitely still like it here at -105. And if LeBron ends up sitting, it's probably going to get wider than that. I also am interested in the under here, especially if Davis and LeBron both play. I think it could be a slower kind of game, and we could end up with a total in the 220s. So I don't mind a look on the under there either. All right. That's the slate for today. I hope it's a great day for you. I hope it's a great day for me. I could use a great day this week. So hope you have a good one. Make some money today, and I'll see you guys on Twitter.